Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. After a hard shift, Kelly was tired. Took her home. The day didn't go well. Already in the morning, the eggs were burnt. The key took a long time to turn in the lock. It was stuck like that, and it wouldn't go in or out. A nurse at work yelled at her, although it wasn't exactly her fault. Just a rabid patient from room 12, to which Kelly left a bucket of rag right on the move, and she said she almost fell over because of it. Nothing like that happened. She was just bored, so she took turns harassing everybody. Today, Kelly was the one who got hit. Understandable, but still unfair and hurtful. Heavy grocery bags were cutting my hands. I didn't buy anything in particular. Potatoes, carrots, onions, a couple of loaves, milk. It seemed to be a little bit of everything on my salary, but it was enough that I could hardly lift it. It was drizzling with tedious rain, piercing a thin jacket with fish fur. There was an old umbrella sticking out of one of the bags. There was no sense in getting it out, because it was impossible to carry both bags in one hand. And suddenly she felt so sorry for herself that tears flowed down her cheeks, mingling with the rain. Maybe for this reason, she did not see anything and no one, and practically ran into something that turned out to be a bag of garbage. It was only when she heard faint moans that she realized it was a person. "What's wrong with you?" Kelly cautiously sat down next to her and touched her shoulder. Of course, no sane person would have done so. But in a woman's instinct kicked in. If someone close to bad need help, that's how her grandmother and mother had taught her. One was a midwife, the other a paramedic. Kelly, on the other hand, was no good, just a nurse. But she remembered her family's lessons firmly. There was no answer, but there was no smell of alcohol from the man lying in the mud. On reflection, Kelly tried to turn him over. How could she do that? She was often mistaken for a teenager because of her thinness. Where would her strength come from? Her hand accidentally bumped into her face. My God, he's burning up. What should we do? Dump him right there and let him die. This was also her father, who collapsed with a heart attack on the sidewalk. They took him for a drunk and didn't dare to come near him. No more daddy. She wouldn't do that. Kelly determinedly dialed the number of the ambulance crew. Oh, she was going to get it from the boys. She'd be lucky to get one. Except they wouldn't take him in a cab. Where'd she get that kind of money, anyway? "Ben, were you on duty just now?" Kelly came to her senses when she heard a familiar voice. "There's a man dying." "No, I don't know him. But what difference does it make? We can't just leave him. That's the way it is." "Are you crazy, Kelly? You always want more than everyone else." "Ben, be human," she begged. "It's just around the corner." "Wait, don't go anywhere," Ben ordered in the same grumpy voice. But it didn't matter. Kelly was jubilant. Then they would come. The ambulance did arrive a few minutes later. Frowning Ben and another paramedic gave the body in the puddle a cursory examination. Scolding and grumbling, they loaded him onto a stretcher. But where would he go? Asked Ben. Kelly, frantically thinking, "Let's go to the intensive care unit. See, he's in bad shape. Oh, we'll be in trouble from the chief." Ben started to say that, but when he looked at the man on the stretcher, he ordered us to get him in the car and put him on an IV. "I don't want to take the sin. He's really squinting, isn't he?" Kelly, having thought about it, got in the car after the stretcher. "Where are you going?" The driver was surprised. "It's my fault if anything goes wrong. I'll take care of it." "I don't want to get you in trouble," Kelly explained. In fact, she couldn't quite fathom what had made her decide to do so. Her hunch had not deceived her. They were almost to the emergency room when the chief physician came out to meet them in open coats. "What's going on here?" He at once, assessing the appearance of the man on the stretcher. "Why are you dragging a homeless man in here? We have a decent hospital. Maybe he has typhus, or worse, he's infecting everyone here, starting with you fools. Take him back to Ethan James immediately. He's very sick." He has a fever. Kelly tried to explain something, but the head doctor rolled his eyes at her and yelled, "Who's so smart? Are you Kelly? Who are you? A doctor? It's your job to wave a rag. If you don't want a dozen of them to take your place, just dig a little younger." Kelly, who only turned 35 this year, silently swallowed her resentment. The chief doctor is right. She is nobody. The nurse is simple, but you can't refuse to help someone in this condition, even if he is the last bum. Doctors take an oath from this. What's his name? Hippocrates. Apparently, the last phrase she inadvertently said aloud, because the chief doctor rolled his eyes and yelled, "You tell me more reasoning, go get a rag. Now unwrap the stretcher and don't let your breath be here." Orderlies solemnly stared at the floor. Go against the head doctor. 100% will be left without a place. But their conscience wouldn't let them do what they were told, so they waited. And Kelly was possessed by the devil. I can't believe they're talking about her like that. Who gave that bastard the right to say mean things about her? Well, since she was fired anyway. Kelly looked around, saw a bucket of dirty water. Apparently, the cleaning lady here didn't really bother. She left the dirt in a prominent place, picked it up, and poured it on the head doctor. He froze with his mouth open and yelled, "I quit," she pronounced and nodded to the orderlies. "Guys, you heard what the doctor said. Take back your sick man cannot wait for help." The orderlies quickly wheeled the stretcher down the corridor. They understood that now the main one would go into the first shock and no one would feel sorry for him, and rightly so. Barely had the door slammed behind them, Chief Doctor burst into such a tirade that it was not of seen only excuses. "You and I before you will not take in any clinic anymore. I'll do my best." He yelled, stomped his feet, clenched his fists. "He's vindictive, isn't he? He will." Ben rolled the stretcher out into the street. "I'll look elsewhere." Then, what difference does it make? Didn't Kelly expect herself to be so resolute? No, she didn't regret her action. It was just that now she did not know what to do next, or where to put the sick bum, and what to do with this one. As if in answer to her thoughts, Ben nodded at the man lying on a stretcher. "I'll take him home." Resolutely shook his head Kelly and immediately fell silent. What was she going to take him with? On her own. Okay, I guess Ben made up his mind. Wait a minute. My shift's over. I'll get the car, and I'll take you, and the foundling. But look, Kelly's in charge, even though he's a jerk, but he's a case of who knows what kind of sickness the man has. He's a human being, Kelly sighed, glad the orderly had a good heart. "Ben, thank you. Oh, I'm going to regret this." He grumbled and disappeared into the hospital wing. They were left to wait. They waited anxiously for the man who was lying there unconscious. A couple of times he moved and groaned, and then Kelly gently stroked his shoulder, whispering patience, "Please, we'll get home now. You'll feel better there." Ben was not deceived. He did drive them to Kelly's house and even helped to carry him into the apartment. Fortunately, Kelly lived on the first floor. He once again warned the former nurse to be careful not to catch anything with him. Disinfect everything. All his clothes should be thrown out. What am I going to change him into? Kelly hesitated. Ben shrugged. Did I mention it was your idea of a pain in the ass? All right, off you go. I'm out of here. Well, now the wife is going to yell. What took you so long? Tell me you were helping me. Kelly was surprised. Ben wagged his finger at his temple and went to the door. She flashed, figuring out what the stranger might have thought. But surely a jealous woman. Tell her, Ben, the plain truth. That's what she always says without thinking. And then she felt ashamed. She always took people at their word, for which she usually paid the price. There was a faint moan from the couch. Kelly perked up, pacing around the room, thinking of what to do next. I'll be right there, she kept saying, pouring a glass of water, going through the meager supplies in the medicine cabinet. This will do. This medicine. Even children are given for high fever. She almost forcibly shoved the pill into the mouth of the sick man. The homeless man covered his mouth and shook his head, not understanding that he wanted good. However, after the third time, she managed to persuade him to swallow the medicine. He drank the water, swallowed it himself, greedily seeing that his throat was dry when the glass was empty. The bum stared inflamed with red eyes. She had to change. "I'm sorry," she started. "Kelly." At least the bum shook his head fearfully, clutching at the edges of his clothes. Apparently, the thought was born in his mind that Kelly wanted to take the last of him. "Give it back. You can't stay in that. It's dirty. I've got an old t-shirt, but it's the right size, and my pants are wide." Kelly continued to persuade him. The bum resisted, but forcefully left him, and he fell back into unconsciousness. Kelly sighed, began to remove his clothes on her own. It stank unbearably. She felt as if insects were swarming over him, but she overpowered herself and slowly turned the helpless body over, trying to get the rags off. The man was, though skinny to the extreme, heavy. After another failure, Kelly gave up and grabbed a pair of scissors. She wasn't going to throw it away anyway. She wasn't going to wash it. It would burst at the seams. She begrudgingly undressed him and began to scrub his body with the damp sponge. He probably hadn't showered in weeks. He smelled of it. But I could not suppress my squeamishness. Having coped with this difficult task, she was dragged sick in his tight-fitting t-shirt and pants, barely covering his knees, wiping sweat from his forehead. She sat down next to the couch right on the floor and asked someone aloud, "What am I supposed to do with him now? I'm not a doctor." However, as expected, there was no response. Kelly looked closely at her found patient. His breathing seemed to be smoother, and there was no wheezing. Life on the streets doesn't look good for anyone. Skinny, unbelievable. His hair's greasy. His cheeks are all stubble. "Who are you, poor man?" Kelly whispered softly. "How did you end up like this? Didn't anyone help you?" They did not. The answer was silence. The homeless man was asleep, and she got up from the floor and went about her business, taking out the garbage. At the same time, she threw out the rags that had served as his clothes. She boiled some chicken broth from a ham. Having remembered that it was the most healthy meal for a sick man, I ate a couple of spoons of it and understood that I did not want to eat. I wanted to cry, even go out loud, complaining about her fate. That's why it's all so. No husband, no children, and now she was out of a job. What had she done wrong in front of heaven? She hadn't done anybody any harm, hadn't killed anybody, hadn't robbed anybody, but she wasn't lucky. That's all. Of course, she could call her mother, just to cry. How could she help? She's living on a small salary herself. Besides, she has only one answer to all complaints. "I told you to marry Trevor Owens." She said, "No, silly. You waited for a prince. So what if he's twice your age? But he's so handsome." I mean, it made me shudder. She barely remembered a husband candidate who really offered her hand and heart, though it was just what they said. It was simpler there. The storekeeper, rank and file, pressed her in the entryway, and breathing right in her face, something nasty, proposed marriage to me. "Kelly, I need a woman in the house, and I don't think anybody will want you." Skinny beggar, come on. Besides, Kelly broke free and ran away hurt. At home, she told her mother everything, and instead of sticking up for her, she shook her head. What a fool. She would have lived behind him like a stone wall. There's money there. Look, they'll find a man like that in no time. What's in it for us? Kelly marveled. He's ugly. He doesn't take care of himself. Nasty. Maybe he killed his wife himself. Don't you ever say that. My mother got angry. If you're not smart, at least listen to your mother. You're sitting on my neck, remember? Then, of course, she repented of having said too much in the heat of the moment. But it had all been said. And Kelly, who was really out of work at the time, quickly packed her bags and went into town. There she got a job as a nurse in a hospital. The salary was small, but from the kitchen I could take the leftovers from lunches and dinners. privileged medications again. In addition, for the first time, she was lucky old nurse rented her one room for ridiculous money. Citing the fact that she almost does not live in town, Kelly knew that the old woman took pity on her. But her pride humbled her, and she often visited her kind grandmother in the suburbs, where she had moved. Here's someone to help. It dawned on Kelly, and she grabbed the phone. Evelyn Nance, hi. I have a problem. She blurted out as soon as she heard the familiar voice. No, I'm fine. This is different. To her delight, the old woman took the news philosophically. That is, she did not demand that the house immediately clean the room with an unexpected and not too welcome guest. Although, of course, she did not express any particular joy either, but it was unlikely that she could count on it. So too, the former paramedic called the preparations made by her in the kitchen, just in case, the first aid kit. Not a panacea, but they would help support the body. The rest is up to you. If he wants to live, he will cope. Thank you, Kelly relieved. However, Grandma was silent. Added Kelly, you are a good soul. I know this, but if there is something worthwhile in the house, better keep it to yourself. Believe me from experience. If you do, you'll find it and run away, and at the same time and take it. If anything, it's bad. Why are you doing this? Kelly was a little offended. You don't know him at all. You wouldn't think I did. You know, sniggered the old woman. What are you so angry about? I want to do you good. What's there to take from me? Kelly sighed. I didn't make any money, and now I'm out of a job. I wonder if I'll have enough to pay for next month. Oh, woe is me. Kelly saw with her own eyes the old woman's hands splayed out. Don't worry. You can always find a yoke around your neck. You have golden hands, and you're not trained to ask for a decent wage for your work. Don't worry. I'll wait. You'll pay me back later. And one more thing. She paused for a moment, and then added if anything was wrong. Call the police right away, or at least call me. The precinct officer owes me a favor. I promised to keep an eye on the apartment. Don't worry, I got it. Kelly turned off the phone and looked at her foundling. So how did you end up on the street? Pondering, she smelled no alcohol. No puncture marks to be seen, either. Something terrible had happened in life. There's no one to help. Maybe so. Then I'm lucky. Since there's nothing left to support you, God willing, I'll pull you through. As if in response to her thoughts, the bum suddenly opened his eyes and focused on her. His lips quivered. He clearly wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come out of his throat. Thirsty, Kelly suggested. The sick man's eyelids closed. He licked his lips. Here you are. Kelly carried a glass of water. She helped him up a little. The homeless man drank, choking greedily, and she moved the edge of the glass a little. Take your time. Okay, no one will take it away. He obeyed and took a gentler gulp, but he kept cawing at her like a stray dog. She wondered if she should feed her man. What if he hit or take away a coveted piece? There you go, said Kelly. And then eat some soup. I'll give you some medicine. You'll be all right. The bum kept his red, inflamed eyes on her, but she wasn't even sure he understood her. What's your name? Kelly tried to speak slowly and clearly. He might be deaf. Then at least he could read her lips. But he just drank in silence, and when the water in the glass ran out, he almost collapsed on the pillow and closed his eyes. All right, rest. Kelly left in the kitchen, deciding that the sick man needed time to get used to her. In the meantime, let him sleep it off for good. On reflection, she went to the kitchen. The broth smelled good, and she was very hungry. But when one was alone, and a sick person needed a nutritious broth more. Sighing, Kelly unlocked the pasta, made a salad, and set to eating. This was the diet she had been used to since high school. It was cheap and hearty. Pasta always helped out when she had a meal. She looked out to see how the patient was doing. Her breathing seemed to be getting smoother, or did she just want to believe it? Back in the kitchen, she stared out the window, trying to figure out what to do next. She should look for a job. That made sense. But where? In the hospital could not even try to get a job. The doctor in charge would keep his word to let everyone know. She's such a bitch, Kelly. That's the last of it. So tomorrow morning, I'll have to take my feet in my hands and walk around town. There's no telling where people are needed. Kelly wiped away a tear. It was a shame to leave the hospital, despite the bastard head doctor and the unhealthy patients. But there was a lot of good left over. Girls from the kitchen fed her, and among the patients there were those who tried to stick a chocolate in her pocket for kindness and attention from the nurse. Hadn't she overreacted? She lost everything all at once because of some homeless person. That's no way to talk about a person, Kelly chided herself. In fact, it was pleasant when the head doctor yelled at her, called her a trashy rag, and probably considered a person of low grade. That should not be allowed. She spent the evening reading, listening to the patient's breathing. A couple of times she gave him a drink. Once he had to change his bed. He peed out of his mind. It's a good thing I put a client under the bed right away. Experience. What can I say? Some of the patients were very infirm. She usually went after them. The rest, they turned their noses up at her. But she got so much gratitude, like from old men and old women with bright eyes. Apparently, it was sent to me in a trial. Decided, in general, not a believer. Kelly. She spent the night uneasy, jumping up and running over to the sleeping man. Her help, however, was not needed, and in the morning she fell into a restless sleep. She awoke at about 10 o'clock. Mentally, she gasped. She had overslept for work. And then she remembered that she no longer had a job, which meant that she would not be scolded. She had a whole day ahead of her, which she had to distribute wisely. Now she would have tea, feed her if she woke up, and then she'd pop out into town for a while. Look around, see if anything is needed. Where is the janitor? Are there enough outlets? They pay ridiculous money for cleaning. So there must be openings. The homeless man was awake, lying with his eyes open. She cautiously sat down next to him. She touched his forehead. The man twitched as a blow caused fear to appear in his eyes. "What are you? What are you?" Soothingly said Kelly. "No one's going to hurt you. I'll just take your temperature." The fever seemed to begin to subside, or did she want to believe it? Spoon-feed the sick man some warmed broth. Kelly looked at him, assessing whether he would be able to lie quietly for a couple of hours while she wandered around looking for work. And by the way, what to do with him next? Waved the thought away, Kelly asked. "Why don't you tell me your name?" "My name is Kelly. And you?" An expression came to the sick man's eyes. He opened and closed his mouth, trying to say a word. But instead, all he heard was a hoarse sound. "Are you mute?" "Straight?" the woman asked. The homeless man hardly turned his head left and right. "If so, then the voice will come back." Kelly rejoiced. "Don't worry, you'll be all right in no time. You'll be all right once we get you better." The homeless man closed his eyes and opened them again. Kelly thought that was a sign of agreement. "I have to be gone for a couple of hours," she explained. "I have to get a job, and I don't have any money. Be patient until I get there. If you have to go to the bathroom, give me a sign. I'll get a bowl." The sick man's pale cheeks turned scarlet, and Kelly was surprised at such bashfulness. He's a marginal. He shouldn't care. Or he had recently hit rock bottom, used to live another normal life, deciding to leave the questions for later. Since no answers were forthcoming from his condition anyway, she gathered herself and went outside the door behind her. The search proved unsuccessful. There were no openings near the house. In addition, the constant feeling of anxiety did not let her go, and she hurried home to her car parked in the driveway. And something did not like the look of it. And Kelly tried, as she could not see, not to step past it. However, she was stopped by a commanding shout. "Hey, Auntie, don't be in a hurry. We have to talk." Kelly shuddered and cringed with fear. Out of the car came two men, one taller, the other stubby, ferret-like. The taller one waved his ID in front of her so fast she couldn't make it out. "Do you live in this building?" the ferret asked, staring at her with narrow eyes. No, I live next door. Kelly lied for some reason. Ferret spat on the sidewalk and pulled out a photograph. Look here, saw him brought in yesterday. Pulled the picture on Kelly. Watched her bum. Didn't see no such thing. She waved her head, feverishly figuring out how to sneak away. The tall man looked at her carefully, evidently trying to determine whether she was telling the truth. Said the woman in your best interest to tell the truth. This is a very dangerous man, a maniac. His voice sounded ingratiating. On the likes of you prey on pity, take, then rape and kill. He must be caught as soon as possible. He's already got a dozen episodes on him. You got it? No, I didn't, Kelly repeated. I'll go. Okay. Oh look, Auntie, if you lied. There was a threat in the tall man's voice. We don't like to joke. Under his heavy stare, Kelly thrashed with grief and flew quickly into the next doorway. Her heart began to pound. She struggled to catch her breath. Anxious thoughts shrank into her head. Who were these people? Why are they looking for the poor bum? Was he really a criminal? Then why did they themselves look more like thugs than law enforcement officials? What are you in trouble, Kelly? She asked herself, begging the heavens to keep the attic open. It was the only chance she had of getting home. And there she would figure something out. Luckily, her usual indifference prevailed, and the door to the attic was open. She made her way through the attic and out onto the landing, listening intently. It seemed quiet. So they didn't know which apartment her bum was in. And they're still waiting, asking around. So she's got some time. And then what? With trembling hands, not getting into the keyhole, Kelly opened the door and flew into the room. The bum was exactly where she had left him. He was awake and now turned in her direction with obvious alarm. Why don't you tell me who you are and why you're being guarded by thugs downstairs? Kelly tried to control her fear, but he realized she was desperately afraid and fell silent. Trying to sit up, he failed. And the stranger stretched out on the couch again, keeping his eyes on her. Begging eyes. I didn't tell them where you kept Kelly. But I need to know the truth myself. Tell me, are you a criminal? He turned his head from side to side with difficulty. A strange howl-like sound escaped from his chest. The heart raced out. So much longing despair was in him. Should we call the precinct officer? She asked herself. The homeless man shook his head, again, trying to say something. And really, what would she tell him? That she brought home a mute homeless man who is now being hunted by bandits. What if he really is one of them? And she shuffled straight in and into the unknowing showdown. And at that moment, the sound of keys could be heard in the door. Kelly covered her mouth with her hand to keep from screaming. The bum tried to crawl off the couch, but he only had the strength to roll over onto his other side. Kelly paced around the room, looking for anything resembling a weapon. She grabbed the hairspray and froze at the door, getting ready to sell her life for dearly. The door swung open. Kelly squealed, pushing the door jamb into the field. Fool, what do you think you're doing? There was a roar from the man who had entered, and Kelly was horrified to recognize him as her landlady's John Granson. They had only seen each other once before, when Evelyn Nance had rented her an apartment. I didn't really like the look in the young man's eyes. He was slippery and judgmental, but Kelly didn't seem to be his type, and they didn't meet again until this very moment. John, you're the one who's sorry, please. Kelly, frightened even more at the sight of the guy's twisted face. He pushed her away, rushing into the bathroom. The sound of water and foul language was heard. Kelly carefully put her ear to the slammed door. It sounded quiet. What's going on in there? John came out of the bathroom. His eyes were red. He looked fierce. First, you make an almshouse out of the apartment. Now you're attacking me. I thought to myself, and realized that the truth would only make things worse. You can think, too, John snorted. I wonder what part of you and my grandmother are two dumb chickens, one dumber than the other. Did you really think I'd let you live here for free? And mess up the furniture, too? My grandmother's the blissful one with no brains. Evelyn Nance said it was okay. Kelly started it, but John interrupted her. I forbid it. Grandma was in the ambulance last night. She had a heart attack. She's going straight from the hospital to the graveyard. She's an old fool. She also asked me to look after you. She's trying to kick the bucket herself. She's worried about you. It's unbelievable. Ranting like that, John walked into the room and stared at the man on the couch. That's the one you brought in. So get out of here together. Clear out your living space. Who? But how? Kelly started, realizing that no amount of arguing would convince the madman, who already felt like he owned the apartment. Get out, I said. John opened the closet and started throwing Kelly's things on the floor. The bum on the couch clenched his fists and growled with impotence. Wait, I'll take care of it myself. Kelly pulled herself together, realizing the inevitability of what was happening. She had no strength to cry, and begging the man was useless. Under John's watchful gaze, she gathered her things into 2 checked bags, with which she moved in. Don't worry. I'll help you throw that scum out. With a jerk, John lifted the bum off the couch and started pushing him toward the exit. Kelly put her shoulder to the man, and soon they were both outside the door. The bum sank to the floor and sat down, with his back against the roughly painted wall. I didn't want to howl out loud, but she knew I couldn't even afford to do that now. Can you make it to the elevator? She asked. The homeless man rose with a great effort, holding on to the wall, leaning against it. But he took a few steps. The stall doors swung open. Kelly pressed the button for the top floor. Nothing else occurred to her. At that very moment, the front door slammed, and somehow the woman knew in her gut that it was one of the 2 men. Apparently, they had decided to go door to door. And if not quite idiots, one must have stayed outside, watching the house. Which means one thing. We need a place to hide right now. John would be more than happy to help law enforcement and turn them in with their guts. Kelly was almost dragging the bum, who could barely move his legs. He was obviously aware of what was going on, but he was too weak, and they were moving too slowly. Still, they bought themselves some time. For how long? Her gaze wandered to the attics. They would once John had taken great pleasure in telling them how he had escorted her. They are not fools. They will realize that if they did not go out, then in the attic we have to go to another entrance, she begged. A grandmother lives there alone. In our department was lying, asked me to look after the cats. I don't know anyone else. Let's try her place. The bum must have understood, because he moved faster, and still it seemed to her that they were barely crawling through the attic, which had suddenly become infinitely long. Grandma Vanessa found herself at home. Who's there? Vigilant. She asked from behind the door when she heard the long bell ring. Vanessa Temple, it's me, Kelly, the nurse. Open the door, please. Kelly stood so that the cautious grandmother could see her through the peephole. Kelly, what's the matter? The grandmother was surprised, but opened the door, and Kelly just burst into the apartment, dragging after her a pale and sweating bum. Who's that? Granny took a step back, looking at the named guest. It takes a long time to explain. Kelly sat the sick man down right on the floor. You are not afraid. We will leave soon. I'm sweetheart. I'm not afraid of anything anymore. It is too late to be afraid. Grandmother really looked at what was happening without fear, more with curiosity. Tell me, maybe I can help. What can I do? Kelly confusedly told the curious Granny the whole story. She listened, nodded attentively, aghast. And when the woman stopped talking, she thought hard. Suddenly, her face lit up with a smile. There is an option. How do you sneak out of the house? Kelly stared at her grandmother incredulously, but she was already cheerfully dialing a number on her cell phone. Hello, Mason. Who else could it be? Here's the deal. Granson, you and the guys can bring your car to the house. You talk to me some more, you self-taught wit. Come on over. I'll explain on the spot. It's not the first time you've dealt with your men. They'll be here soon, Granny explained, looking at Vanessa's cell phone. Who's coming? What for? We can't get out of the house. Look at him. We barely made it here. Kelly thought her grandmother had gone senile, but she looked very pleased with herself. Don't look at me, honey. I'm old. I can still think. Since childhood, I love detectives. Now my deduction came in handy, the grandmother announced, looking out the window from behind the curtain. Yeah, they're coming up, so that's it. Get dressed. I put a headscarf on my head. No one will look at you. No men will look at old women. I know that from my own experience. And you, my dear, you'll have to put up with it. That was referring to the bum. He didn't seem to know what he was talking about. He was still sitting there, unresponsive, his back against the wall. Kelly, obeying an order from her grandmother, followed her into the room to change. All the clothes the ostrich put on, looking in the mirror, shuddered. Now she looked about 60 years old, no less. Well, excellent disguise. The doorbell rang. Granny looked through the peephole and opened, letting in two grim-looking men. Granny, what are you up to? Asked the younger one. I have work. Clients are waiting. And I am on your whim, driving a car. Your clients can wait. They have nowhere to hurry. Granny snapped. I need your help, grandson. We have to get him out of the house unnoticed. She nodded at the homeless man. The man looked skeptically at him and carefully looked at the old woman. What are you looking at? She said calmly. Looking for him, and oh so doubtful that the cops, it was bandits hit, and by no means a fortune teller. And you signed me up for such a case. Loving grandson looked at his partner. He shrugged his shoulders, he said. Sort it out yourself. So it turns out that there is no one else. Grandma remained calm. Maybe you can save a man's life, and you will be credited. Not in this world, then in the other one. All right, my grandson gave up. Where to? But certainly not to herself, grinned the grandmother. To the temple to Father Demetrius. Let me call him. He won't refuse. Father is a fighter. Came to God in the hot spots. He won't give him away. All right. Mason ordered the rest. The partner unwrapped the black opaque bag, helped the bum, crossed into it, caught the zipper, so that only his face looked out. Kelly turned to grandmother Vanessa. Who are you anyway? Quietly she asked. Granny smirked. Vanessa Temple, slave of God. I live by his laws. Hurry up, boys. We'll talk later. When this is all over. Her grandmother crossed herself at the same time, pushing her to the exit. Men habitually picked up a sack, for the first time sheltered in its depths. Albeit faintly, it was a living body. Kelly pulled into the elevator with them. A small shiver pounded her. Her teeth chattered, but she ordered herself, well, get it together. And yet the terror didn't let go until the moment they loaded into a car marked ritual services. Kelly managed to glance up at her driveway. Yes, she guessed it. The ferret was smoking, leaning against the car and watching the entrance for them. He barely glanced up and turned away. When the car drove away to a safe distance, Mason unzipped the bag, breathed, sickly. Consider if you rode with us alive. You'll live a long time. The bum nodded, and Kelly was glad he understood something. He might even come to his senses. Thank you. Mason thanked Kelly from the bottom of her heart. You saved us. God bless you for that. Thank your grandmother, Mason grinned. She looks like a dandelion, but she's a matriarch. She's the quiet one now. She used to be a tough old broad, although it's understandable with her background. But then I'm sorry. Let her tell it herself, if she wants to, of course. We'd better get out of this alive, Kelly sighed. He won't talk. I don't even know why he's wanted. So why did you get involved? Mason was surprised. You're such fools, you sissies. Where are we with brains? That's where you are with your feelings. She couldn't just leave her on the street, Kelly explained. A man is not a dog. You'd bring a stray dog back to your place. Mason snorted. Okay, I did as Becca asked. You and Father Dimitri deal with it from here. They came out of the box. You'll live. That was for the bum. Mason and Kelly helped him out. Then the men almost lifted him out of the car in their arms, sent him to the sick man's fence. Mason knocked on the gate, and it was opened by a black-clad clerk, not even humble, but frowning and even threatening. The monk held a similarly gloomy dog on his leash. The dog was silent, but his muscles were tense. He was ready to leap at a possible intruder at any second. "Phew, the faithful bass," said the monk. "Who are you?" "Why have we come to the abode of humility to see Father Demetrius?" pronounced Mason, and added with a Vanessa Temple greeting. The dean suddenly brightened up and asked in a different voice from the Vanessa woman, "So, how is she?" "Alive and well," reported Mason. "So, may I come in?" Vanessa's friends are always welcome. The deacon shied away, letting Mason and Kelly through to support the bum. "This one's no good with you. The guy can barely stand on his feet, but he's an outsider. And he would easily pick up her husband in his arms like a child and carry him deep into the monastery courtyard." Didn't find the child following either. The splendor of the snowy temple with its golden domes was never there. Particularly devout ran to church and on major holidays, and even more so because that's what everyone was doing. But here she felt as if someone was looking at her, someone who understood everything. "Lord, Heavenly Father," Kelly prayed, "help me to set her on the right path. Her whole life is going upside down, nothing to hold on to. And by force to understand why I live in this world, I suffer." And at that moment the clouds over the temple parted, as if pulled apart by mighty hands, and the bright sunlight fell on the cross, settled with pure light. Kelly shuddered and crossed herself. The deacon did not go inside the temple. Turning to a small outbuilding in the infirmary he needed, explained in a bass voice, "They're behind him, brothers watching, and you wait here. Now we'll go to Father Demetrius," surrendering the homeless man from hand to hand. No less sturdy brothers who approached them, and the conductor took them to the refectory. "From here on out on your own," he ordered my business. The wait was not long. The door was open, and the priest entered the room. Kelly looked at him and was dumbfounded. The priest was handsome with an incredible iconic beauty, strictly out of place. Eyes piercing, blue, sharp, looked like X-rays. What his grandma Vanessa said about him. He'd been in hot spots. He could have been a sniper. "Oh, stop guessing," and she pulled back on herself. "Who are you to judge?" He made his choice. He came to the light and led others to it. And you spend your life in the dark, telling me what happened. "My daughter," Father Demetrius said, and she, confused, hurriedly, began to tell strange stories. "Listen to her until the end," said the priest. "Nothing. First, under the influence of your found Shah, and then with God's help, maybe he will talk. Perhaps he is in shock. Shocks can make people lose the ability to speak. But no, he'll write. Then don't worry. We have good healers. They'll get you back on your feet in no time. Now we have to decide what to do with you. I understand you have nowhere to live. That's all right. We have a house for pilgrims. I think you'll be able to settle down there." "Father, I'm sorry," at Kelly's. "I can't afford to pay." The priest raised his eyebrows up. He looked reproachfully. "My daughter, did I say Mazda? You'll live, but you can help with the chores, if you don't mind doing it for nothing." "All right," Kelly nodded, keeping her eyes on her father. His eyes had a hypnotic effect. Maybe he really could see right through her. All the doubts, all the sorrows. Her enters my daughter. If the soul asks to go to temple, come to evening prayer. Maybe when the mind cleansed the soul open, then and the answers to your questions will come. Softly said the priest, and went out. Only now did Kelly realize that Mason had been with her the whole time. "Come with me. I know where the inn is." Mason tugged at her sleeve, pulling her out of her stupor. "What good is Father Demetrius?" Kelly nodded, for it was hard to deny the obvious. "My grandmother told me about him in a heroic way. The man had been through hot spots. Never took a bullet, but when he was a civilian they nearly killed him with a word. He stood up for justice with guys like him. but almost didn't get locked up. My grandmother made all the connections to the very top, so that the charges were dropped. After that, the spiritual himself left the world. Now there's only one judge over him. The only righteous. Kelly listened with bated breath. Her usual gray world was falling apart into pieces of life, rapidly turning in different directions, and she could not keep up with these changes, as if she was inside a movie, not knowing the role and the plot, and desperately wanted to go back to where everything was clear and simple. But something told me there was no way back. She had no choice but to trust her fate. Mason took her to the sturdy, two-story house. He helped her carry her bag and called upon Miranda's mother. I'm coming, she heard from the back of the house, and a stern, middle-aged woman, reminiscent of a school teacher, came out to them, wiping her hands with a towel. Miranda, however, nodded affably. Barely had Mason explained that they had been sent by Father Demetrius. Live as many pilgrims as you need now. People seek God on great feasts, and on the rest of the time they hurry to sin. Follow me. Miranda turned and walked down the corridor, and Mason and Kelly looked at each other and followed her. This is where you will live. Miranda made the door a bright, modestly left room. And you do not ask for it. I think, so as not to embarrass the girl with unnecessary thoughts. This was referring to the glass. A stern mother, Miranda. Mason winked. You listen to the bad will not teach you. I really must be going. I'll see you when I get a chance. Don't hang us. We'll get through this. I'm worried about your grandmother. Kelly really felt responsible for suddenly going out with her problems to the kind old lady. What if those thugs went apartment by apartment looking for us? Bummer. Mason hummed. Don't you know your grandmother well? She's a fighter. You can't get too much out of her. Don't worry about it. I'm visiting, of course. Go ahead. Miranda reminded her of herself. Mason bowed to her and left, leaving the women alone. Mother Miranda, I have practically no money, said Kelly. Can I do some work in the kitchen to help with the cleaning? Miranda shrugged her shoulders and suddenly smiled. No, if you do, if God has brought you here, everything will be fine. Think about eternal things, about how you live, what your soul asks for. You pray, you live in the fresh air, in a long place. You'll see, all your problems will go away. Make yourself comfortable and come to the refectory. I'll feed you, if you like. Tell me what your problems are, and we'll think about it together. Barely had the door closed behind her. Kelly slumped in her chair, helpless. What a day it had been. She lived her usual gray life. Happy little things, sad and without reason. And then, as if death had swirled. And how to get out of it all. And what else lies ahead? Kelly looked out the window. The view opened directly onto the temple, and she gazed involuntarily at the sight of the majestic beauty. The sun had fallen on the gold of the dome, making it so it was becoming unbearable to her eyes. Kelly hesitantly crossed herself. Then another and another. Her lips pronounced by themselves, Lord, all things good. I trust in you. She felt like she was breathing a little easier. She quickly unpacked her things and strode down the corridor, looking for the refectory. There was no mistaking it. Such an aroma wafted from the kitchen. At the table sat Miranda, and a teenage girl dressed as well as her mother, austere and modest, eating what God had sent her. Miranda moved a plate of vegetables to Kelly, grabbed a spoon, but noticing the stern look, crossed herself. Repeat after me, Miranda and the girl recited a short prayer of thanksgiving. Kelly repeated, and gradually the anxious thoughts dissipated, giving way to peace and tranquility. The food was delicious, simple, and hearty, and Kelly could barely keep from asking for more. However, Miranda understood and put another piece of fish on the guest's plate. Thank you. It was delicious. Kelly thanked her from the bottom of her heart. Well, you can learn to cook like that yourself. If you help me, you will. Miranda smiled. Let me show you the kitchen while my daughter does the dishes. The kitchen turned out to be spacious, and to Kelly's surprise, perfectly equipped with all the necessary appliances. It was the dream of a housewife accustomed to handling the simplest of household appliances, even without an oven or microwave. The kitchen here seemed like a housewife's paradise. Miranda explained where everything was kept, showed her how to use the food processor, and pointed to the pile of potatoes that needed to be prepared for dinner. Kelly waited for questions, but her mother didn't ask her anything, and the woman slowly calmed down and got to work. Running. Molly smiled a bright smile. Quietly she said, "You're an aunt. Do not be afraid of anything, Father Dimitri. He is a holy man. Everyone will be helped according to their conscience. And Mother Miranda only looks harsh. She has a heart of gold." "Do you live here or do you work here?" Kelly asked. "I live and work here," Molly eagerly explained. "I'm an orphan. When my parents died, I ran away, so they wouldn't send me to an orphanage. Then I came here, and I live here. It's nice here, and God led you here by the hand. Don't doubt it." "Thank you for the kind word," Kelly smiled. But her daughter made a stern face. "That's not how you say thank you." "That's how you say thank you," Kelly obediently repeated. The daughter nodded and ran off to run her errands, leaving Kelly alone again. The woman waited with apprehension. She had never been to church before. She was almost ashamed of her ignorance. Every time there were some mean old women there. So Kelly slowly came to the conclusion that it wasn't for her. If she was so ignorant, she shouldn't have to do it on her own. But now there was no way she could do it alone. Maybe Father Dimitri would not shame her for not praying according to the rules. And in general, it's not that simple. All her doubts were dispelled. As soon as she stepped into the temple and stood on the sidelines, watching the praying from the walls, the holy faces looked on. Father Demetrius' voice fills the heart with joy and anticipation of a miracle. And yet Kelly was very afraid that now the priest would offer her a confession, and she was not at all ready. Ashamed of a wasted life. She was nothing. She's worked her life. Angry, sinning. In short, it's just like everyone else. But her fears were unfounded. Calmly, she repeated after the people in the temple, baptized as they did. She crouched down after them all. And somehow, imperceptibly, she was absorbed with her head in the magical atmosphere. She came to her senses only when everybody was gone, and they were alone with the priest. "I settled in instead of the expected sermon," said Father Demetrius. "I'm very well set up," replied Kelly. And then, I added, Mother Miranda helped. She praised me, but come on. Father Dimitri's eyebrows went up. It was only then that Kelly decided to raise her eyes and look at his face and realized that he was smiling. If it was Miranda herself praised. "So you tried. She's a tough one. She doesn't praise for nothing. You wouldn't know that it wasn't always like this." The priest was silent, and Kelly realized that he would not broach the subject. The woman shrank back, expecting questions and reprimands about her own life, which she believed to be far from righteous. However, what she heard was a complete surprise. "You know you saved a man's life, don't you? A lot of people will let you go for that." "I think so, but what can you prove? You're my brave daughter. Well, how could I let him go?" Kelly started stammering. How many people would have done that if they were you? "As if not her, but yourself," asked the priest. The craft walk in the temple, and the other should say. All Out once again cast a glance at the austere faces of icons and crossed herself. Kelly followed the priest out into the courtyard. Just there, feeling a little more confident. What is he talking about? Was her bum so bad that he was really at death's door? Or are we talking about something else? "Don't worry, we'll find yours." The priest dispelled her doubts. From all indications, it was not the usual illness. They had kept him on some powerful drugs for a long time. He could have just turned. They must have wanted to knock out his memory. Maybe he knew or saw something he shouldn't have. His blood will come back to normal gradually. But that's not even the point. Kelly froze, waiting for him to continue. By all appearances, he's been homeless for a while now. That tells you a lot. It doesn't take long to explain. Apparently, he decided to play homeless for some reason. And then something didn't go according to plan. Now his brothers cleaned him up, cut his hair, and threw his picture in the search engine. Maybe they'll find a match. Maybe they're looking for him. Father Dimitri explained. Do you have internet here too? Kelly first asked, and then with the force of his tongue. She is talking nonsense. Who says that the priest should not use the internet? It's available, it's available. Father Demetrius understood her confusion. Not a needle in a stack. We're looking. I have another question, my daughter. Are you lost? How to live now? Do you think? Kelly was silent. A lump came to her throat, and she couldn't swallow it. And really, what was there to do? No job, no place to live. Where did you run away from? Someone is waiting for you. Father Dimitri continued gently. Close relatives may be anxious and looking for you. I have a mother and grandmother. Only they live in another city with difficulty, Kelly spoke. I haven't told them anything. Why worry? I don't know what to do and how to do it. That will give you time to think. Father Demetrius nodded. While you live with us, Miranda, help. After my daughter. You'll see, the girl's got it in life. Don't look what? What if it's warming up next to you? Then we'll figure out where to put your strength, huh? There are a lot of places where you need a hand and a heart. But you can't make a mountain of gold there. And I don't need to. I'm not used to it. Kelly managed to smile. She felt as if she'd regained her footing. And I can see him. You worry about a stranger. Father Dimitri reached out and stroked her head. Felt good. As if as a child, when her father looked at her like that, in the rare moments between smells, she had few such moments to confess. Now he was sleeping. He was gaining strength. All the crap is out of him. Now a sound sleep is shown on the herb healing vitamins. Father Patrick knows his business. He's a military doctor with a history. Kelly did not ask why the experienced doctor did not work in the clinic at the Temple Hospital. She guessed that he made the choice consciously. He was not looking for profit. A strange world opened up to her, not like the usual, where everyone thought first of himself, and secondly too. Yet it was here that she felt calm and happy as never before. It was late. It's time for you to rest, Father Demetrius reminded her, noticing that she was thinking hard. With God's help, everything will work out. Kelly bowed to the father and went in the direction of her temporary abode. Miranda asked no questions, handed out a cup of tea with liver cones, and strongly advised to go to bed. Kelly willingly followed this advice, though it was not yet 9 o'clock. After taking the shower, she happily stretched out on the clean linen, feeling her tired body spread out, her muscles aching sweetly. In the middle of the night, she was awakened by either crying or screaming. Kelly sat up in bed, twiddling her head, trying to determine the source of the sound. The slippers went out into the hallway, listening. The sounds came from the third room. Kelly gingerly pulled the doorknob. That one was going on, and a woman stepped in, peering into the darkness. Molly, it's you. Are you crying? Quietly, so as not to frighten, she asked. Sobs came out. The little figure sat up on the bed. I'm scared. A sob uttered the girl. Sit with me, please. What is there to be afraid of? Kelly sat down beside her. The girl snuggled up to her, and Kelly felt her heart beating hard. Not here, Molly whispered softly. I dreamed I was there again. In another life. It was just a dream. Kelly stroked her in her arms, feeling the girl gradually calm down. It's a dream now. It was, but it is still diminishing. Looked at her. Stay with me, don't go away, I will. Do not worry, Kelly promised. The girl lay down, not letting go of her hand, and soon her breathing became sleepy and even. After sitting beside her for a little while longer, Kelly walked out into the hallway, bumping into Miranda. Are you asleep? She asked. Kelly nodded, and in turn asked the question. What's wrong with her? What is she afraid of? Miranda looked at her, as if doubting whether to answer. She suggested we go and have some tea. She can't sleep anyway. She sleeps in the kitchen till morning now. Miranda made tea and filled the room with the scent of herbs. What's wrong with the girl? Kelly asked. She's had it in her life. Reluctantly, Miranda answered. When the locals brought her to us, she was like a wild animal, wouldn't let me touch her. It was only later her father got through to her, because she told him. It turns out that after her parents died, she went to town. That's where kind uncles from the station took her. They said it was on the eve, but for kids like her, and she was practically enslaved. She said there were a lot of people there, both children and adults. She was forced to work from morning till night, and they beat her for the slightest offense. They were used in every way they could. That was it. Kelly shuddered and covered her mouth with her hand so as not to scream in horror. What kind of animal did she have to be? How could she break free? She whispered. She said one of the bums helped the guards distract her. While they were beating him, she crawled under the fence and ran away. Our priest is still looking through his channels to bring those scumbags to trial. What will happen to her next? It's hard to imagine what kind of trials the girl will go through. She will grow up, Miranda shrugged. Time and prayers are the best healer. No one will hurt her here, though she is warming to her soul. Kelly pondered. Until this minute, her own problems had seemed to her extremely difficult and almost insoluble. And here was a child with such a burden on her soul. Well, what can you do? Sighed Miranda. How do you think you can go on living? I'll stay here too. She threw her head back. Kelly Miranda stared at her and shook her head. Can you stay? Sure. Only it seems to me you haven't lived that old life of yours yet. No husband, no children. It's tempting. Maybe you should live a worldly life first. You'll try. I'm old now. Bitter, sighed Kelly. 40 years old. No beauty, no intelligence. Who'd want her? No one. Miranda answered calmly. If you don't appreciate what God gave you, who will appreciate it for you? Crisco threw herself in Kelly's face. She lowered her head and felt a warm, motherly hand stroke her head. Live here as long as you need to. There's plenty of work to do, too. And think about what I said. Let's go to bed, though. I have to get up early for morning prayers. May I? Kelly asked. You have to, if you want to. Miranda smiled. Kelly fell asleep at once calmly, as she had not fallen asleep for a long time. In the morning, Miranda woke her up, and the three of them went to the temple. Kelly felt rested and refreshed. The faces of the saints no longer seemed so harsh, and no one here reproached her for her ignorance and disgrace. All day long, she helped Miranda with household chores. Her daughter was hanging around. They looked at each other and smiled. After lunch, a deacon who called himself Father James stopped by the inn and called Kelly to the hospital. The woman was frightened at first, expecting bad things to happen, but she was immediately reassured, explaining that the patient's condition had improved. He came to his senses. He is calling you. With gestures, right? His voice isn't back, but he's trying to make sounds, her companion explained. Nearby the mighty docks, Kelly tried to stay close to James. Don't worry, he won't touch her unless I tell him to, Father Demetrius reassured her. Father Patrick met them at the hospital. Not an old man yet, so professorial in appearance that once he was wearing a masked native costume. Kelly remembered that he was also a former military doctor and felt respect for the man. This, then, is our savior, smiled the professor. You can't tell from the look of it that you're desperate for courage. Okay, without blushing. Did you really save a man's life? We drained the crap out of him. Now the hope is for a strong body. He's strong. He's trained. He should be able to handle it. Maybe then he'll tell us why he had to become homeless. Are you sure he's not a bum? Kelly asked. That's what Father Dimitri said too. But he was a vagrant for a year, and not before that. His teeth are fine. Muscles like he never left the gym. The condition of his internal organs also shows excellent health. The doctor shrugged. Come in and don't be afraid. He's conscious and has eaten already. Kelly followed him into the room. The man on the bed stirred. Ahead of him, Six glanced at the man who had entered. The woman sat down on a stool beside him, examining the capable man. Now washed and trimmed, he looked much better. Handsome, too, it turned out. "Hello, Aunt Kelly. Remember when she started? We used to run away from bandits together." He nodded and reached out with a hand that was not free from the drip, squeezing his fingers, keeping his gaze on her. The sounds were hard for him to make, and yet it was an attempt to speak. "Yes, I'm Kelly, pleased," she nodded. "And what's your name?" He was silent, but the woman guessed Alex. "Alex," he nodded, not stirring his fingers. "Everything will be all right. Sashenka, trust me. There's a great doctor here. He will put you on your feet," she said, herself not believing her words. He nodded in agreement. "Aunt Kelly, Mother Miranda is looking for you." A little voice came from the doorstep. "Get out of the street." Noisily thus, the doctor popped up inside the board. But the girl froze on the threshold, gazing into the face, lying on the bed. "Uncle dear," suddenly she cried out, rushing to the sick man. "Did you get out too? They did not kill you." The girl threw herself on her knees, kissing the blanket and the sick man's hand. "He was the one who saved me from those bandits, so I could escape." The girl cried and laughed at the same time. What a turnaround. The doctor and the monk looked at each other. They pounced, raising the girl from her knees. "It's all right to help him. Let's go see Mother. Miranda is calling. He needs peace now," she persuaded her daughter. And she snapped back to her savior. "Uncle Alex, we later visited. Let him get better for a little while." The daughter cried silently and wiped her tears with her sleeve. "I thought they killed him because of me, you know. No one stepped in. Everyone was afraid and endured. And he's different. Everything's going to be all right," Kelly repeated. At Miranda's questioning look, I answered, "It turns out he helped me escape. Molly, don't cry. Put a candle for your savior," and prayed sternly, said Miranda. The girl's tears instantly dried up, and she ran away. "God works in mysterious ways," Miranda concluded. "It seems to me that the story is not over yet." She was right. It continued. That evening, the three of them were walking from the service when 4 cars pulled up to the gate, and from there people were pouring out, obviously not of pilgrimage kind. "These are God's creatures. Open up. We have an urgent confession to make." A mocking voice was heard. Father Demetrius intercepted the leash and went to the gate. Something of humility. "You little page," with a threat in his voice, he said. "I fear the Lord will not hear you. You'd better get out of here in good health. I'll open it for you. We might as well open it ourselves." The bandits were no longer hiding their intentions. "Try it." The deacon suggested, a friend growl, baring his fangs. The women froze, unsure of what to do. Miranda was the first to react. "Run to the hospital. Close them there," she ordered. "And you as the mother," whispered Kelly. "We did. Don't worry." Miranda called back and raised her voice. "Run along, I tell you." The deacon was saying something into the phone. Kelly, already grabbing her daughter by the hand, saw a 2 or 3 sturdy brothers running toward the gate. At that second, her cell phone rang in her pocket, which she had completely forgotten about. "Kelly, what's up?" "Mason tells me you're settled in, but I'm worried about you." She heard her grandmother, Vanessa Temple's voice. "There's bandits," I shouted into the phone. "Kelly, I can't talk. Call the police, please." Together with my daughter, they ran into the hospital, bumping into Father Patrick. "Stay here." "Forbidden," he said. "Don't open to anyone. Maybe we'll fight back." "Where are you going, doctor? You're not supposed to have guns," Kelly asked. And then she realized what a silly thing to say. "Nothing. We'll talk more. Word of God." The former doctor smirked and made a stern face. "And what are you doing? Lie down. Yesterday I was still dying. And there you go." Kelly saw Alex trying to get out of the room, holding onto the wall. His face was whiter than chalk, but he stubbornly moved toward the exit. It put him down. Father Patrick barked and shut the door. Who told? Kelly slammed the door and rushed to his bum, exhorted, "Lie down. Sweetheart, where are you going to fight now? You just came back from the other side of the world, and you're going back." Moved the bum, pushing her hands away for and not getting to you. Anyone would have stood up for anyone. Kelly understood him. "You'll only get in the way now. I'm sorry. Uncle dear, don't go there." Molly got hold of him from the other side. "It's me, Molly, remember. I'll pray for you. Don't die, please." There was a rumbling sound, and everyone froze, listening to the screams outside. But there was the distinct rumble of helicopters. Then a clear voice, repeatedly amplified loudspeaker, said the weapon on the ground muzzle on the incomprehensible "We opened fire without warning work Spetsnaz." "What is this? Where did they come from?" Kelly whispered and immediately shrieked. "Sash, why are you sick?" The bum was slowly eating away at the floor. She and her daughter managed to pick him up and drag him to the bed. While they were taking care of the sick man, the battle seemed to be over. This was announced by Father Patrick, who returned. The doctor opened the door with his key and now stood in the doorway, turning his head. He had seen a lot in his life. On such things. Now that's really heavenly troops coming up. Did you summon it? Father Dimitri, ours did, but they told us to hold out for an hour. They can't make it any sooner. I only called Vanessa, or rather, she herself stammered, answered nothing understanding. Kelly, Father Patrick looked at her and laughed. "Yes, she has influence even now. Vanessa Temple built everyone up. Who the hell is she?" Kelly flashed her arms. She thought what was happening was a miracle. There aren't many like her around the country, but you can take her word for it. For what she once did for the country should be a monument. Only such cases are classified as secret, with no statute of limitations. But those who know her still salute when they meet, Father Patrick explained. Saved 1,000 people. Now you and us. I guess. Where are the heroes? Kelly pointed to the bed. Father Patrick took the pulse, muttered nothing. He recovered and grinned. Our guys will be here soon. We got the brothers packed up. They'll have to answer to the court, but not all of them are here. We've got a nest of snakes to stir up. People will have to be freed and fed. And this warrior, I'm watching. His words were prophetic. An hour later, the temple grounds became crowded. The hotel room was filled with people. After listening to Father Demetrius with a military bearing, the guests and their brothers once again got into their cars and set off in an unknown direction. By evening, the cars were already full of homeless, emaciated, ragged, hunted people crowded into the hotel and the hospital. Kelly barely had time to feed, bring water, riot, and treat wounds and bruises. There were children here, and they were especially scary to look at. Somehow, everyone was accommodated. And Father Demetrius convened a council of war. What shall we do with the brothers who have arrived? He asked. Let's go. Father James spoke up. Who wants to leave? Shall we let go? Who has nowhere to go? Let them stay while we put them in the hospital. And then we'll build a bigger house. God brought them here. We can't oppose his will. That's my reasoning too. Father Dimitri agreed. For a long time, I've been thinking of founding an orphanage like this. We can do it. Brothers, we can do it. Many voices responded. We will help. Leaving decided a fraction. Many who were freed stayed. Kelly Miranda talked to the women, helped them get settled in. Father Demetrius, Father Patrick, dealt with the men. When Kelly calmed down a bit, Father Demetrius called us in. We found your Alex without any preamble, the priest began. Look, he with photographs printed on the printer. Kelly looked at Kelly and the familiar face of Alex Barnes. Red Kelly, a journalist and crime news anchor, reported missing since January 2020. What's that supposed to mean? He decided to do his own investigation. He's gone in disguised as a bum. So the priest almost got himself killed, but it turns out he saved everybody as a result. God works in mysterious ways. Kelly said and crossed herself. "What did you decide?" the priest asked. "Maybe you can stay and help out. And there is enough work." "I will stay, as it was decided a long time ago," Kelly answered. "And I have a request. Father, help me with the adoption documents." Father Dimitri's eyebrows went up. "Are you good?" thought my daughter. "You're not old. You'll give birth to your own." "Maybe yes, maybe not." I shook my head. "Kelly, God sent me this. Good for you. Good decision." The priest smiled. "I'll help. Don't doubt it." The daughter agrees. "I do." "Do you agree?" It came from behind me. When they looked back, they saw the little girl who had been eavesdropping on their conversation the whole time. What a juvenile spy. The priest laughed. "You can't hide anything from her. Will you really be my mother?" she asked the girl. Kelly nodded and hid her tears. The girl rushed to her neck, whispering, "Mommy, Mommy, my darling." "That's good," Father Demetrius summed up. "All that's left is to get our hero back on his feet." "I will," said Kelly firmly. "Let's do it," said Molly. Alex really got better. Either the treatment helped, or the holy place had a miraculous effect on the process. But after a month, his voice came back to him. Kelly had time to help everyone at once, solving many problems and wanting people in the new place. So that time flew by without her noticing. Her daughter followed her like a tail everywhere. Afraid to lose sight of her newfound mother, for even a minute Kelly felt happier than ever. Her life was remembered for meaning. Feeling better, Alex went to town. Kelly felt sad. She had become attached to a bum who turned out to be a journalist. She had often wondered what courage and recklessness it took to stick her nose into an animal's lair, investigating the disappearance of people no one really needs, but who pays attention to bums. Molly helped her to keep her head up, and really, she didn't expect to get anything more than a thank you. Miranda, however, noticed the change in her mood. After the journalist had left, she walked over, patted her on the shoulder, and said everything was in God's hands. "Pray. He will not leave you." Kelly prayed. And then she threw herself back into her work, which had no end in sight. But it was her life's choice, and there was no time for discouragement. One Sunday morning, her father called to her. "James glowered. There are guests coming to see you. Run to the refectory." Kelly, certainly not expecting guests, stared at him perplexedly. "Run? Who am I talking to?" The deacon encouraged her. Kelly turned around and went into the refectory. The place was so crowded that she did not immediately see Grandmother Vanessa seated at the table beside the priest. There she was, our little dove proclaimed. Vanessa Temple blossomed and looked prettier, a bride indeed. "Hello, Vanessa Temple." Kelly smiled at her. "You are, as it turned out, the Commander-in-Chief. Saved us all, in fact. But since I'm Commander-in-Chief, that's my order too." The grandmother laughed. "As they say, you have the goods. We have a merchant. Do you want to get married? Will you?" "You are joking, Vanessa Temple." Kelly was taken aback. "Have you come to marry me off to Mason?" "No, he's a dolt. He's a dolt." "Yes, and did not deserve such a wife," slyly replied Grandmother Vanessa. "I have another matchmaker and asked to speak." "Hello, Kelly." She looked back at the voice of the entrant. Alex was standing on the threshold. There was nothing of the jaded bum she had first seen in him. Only his eyes remained the same. She recognized him by them. "Marry me. I couldn't have a better wife. I've been thinking about you every minute since I left. And when I heard you decided to adopt, I knew. There ain't another soul so pure in the world. I love you, Kelly, and I'll cherish you for the rest of my life. Say yes." She's not lying. Grandma Vanessa planted it. "I know people. What's the matter with you? Look at you, already slipping into a faint." Kelly felt strong arms pick her up. Father Demetrius married them. There were so many people gathered that there was nowhere for an apple to fall. Bells were ringing in the air. Kelly was holding Alex's hand. A happy Molly was jumping beside her. They thought about what amazing twists and turns the most ordinary, seemingly ordinary fate can have. Tell her who the plot was. Wouldn't have believed it. Would have said that such a story can only be in fairy tales happens. But the three of them would write their own fairy tale together. Praise be to thee, O Lord, for thy unfathomable goodness. Keep my loved ones safe. Give us the strength to do good in your name. Sincere words came off their lips, and as if giving a sign, white doves swirled the newlyweds, and a ray of sunshine fell on the cross, trapped by a light not of this place. The world shone with wonderful colors, and there was enough light, goodness, and mercy for all. So it was, so it is, and so it will be, as long as there is faith, hope, and love in our hearts.